Hello, everyone. It is Tia here with,
I'm Kim.
and we are super excited to have another episode of Masks Off with you. Today, our quote is going to be from Martin Luther King Jr. Only through the bringing together of head and heart, intelligence and goodness, shall man or woman rise to a fulfillment of his or her true nature. I did add in the other gender into that quote. So, or
Yes.
not gender, there's lots of genders, but
Yes. Gotcha. Just, yeah.
yeah. So when I first read that quote, it did make me think for a little bit. I don't know about you. I think so from what we were
Yeah,
talking about
definitely.
briefly.
I definitely was challenged by it.
Because we talk so much about our thought trains and our mind taking over. And when we started talking about what we're going to talk about today, are we making decisions from feelings, from our head, our heart, all of that? That quote really made me realize that it is about balancing. And it's not just making decisions from our heart or directly from our intuition necessarily, per se. What is intuition? And so it really made me realize, and it comes back to our Balancing Your Backpack course of balancing body, mind, and spirit. Because if we are too much in our head or too much in our heart, it can get out of balance. And what we were just saying, sometimes we need to be more in our head to make us decision, and we need to be more in our heart. So recognizing it can vary, and there's that gray area again. It's versus the pendulum swing of all heart, all head. Where is it? And then it can ebb and flow, more heart-based decision, more head-based decision, gut, all of that. So what came up for you?
Yeah. So I will just jump right in with sharing the example that I was sharing with you, how my daughter is trying to make some decisions. And what we're talking about is making decisions, right? When you're
Right.
going to your head versus heart. And so she is already having to make a decision about housing for next semester because the school sent out the forms and said, you have 2 weeks to decide
Right.
what you're going to do. And, and I understand a lot of her points. She has valid points. And I'm watching her fear, her worry rise,
Yeah.
but so is mine. Like I can feel it too. So but there's that quickness, there's that urgency. That's the thing. I think when we make decisions from a place of urgency, or impulsiveness is another one, being impulsive or urgent, we can probably trace that back to a feeling of there's some fear, anxiety, and scarcity going on. In which case, then that's coming totally from the head.
Right.
And not really tapping into intuition.
Yeah. And then you have that external expectation. You have 2 weeks to make a decision.
Yes.
So there's that pressure. And sometimes impulsive decisions are important, like what we were talking about before, when you actually have, like, you need to go into that fight or flight, like true danger.
Yes.
You have to make a decision like that, which is very different than you have 2 weeks to make a decision, fear, lack based. Like, what am I going to do? I have to make this decision. What is everyone? Then you're looking to the external. Yes. What is everyone else doing often?
Right, because it comes down to, so it is kind of like the saber-toothed tiger coming at her, because if I don't find a roommate,
right,
and I can't get an apartment, then I could be all, and it all boils down to I'm going to be all alone, right? Or it could boil down to I'm going to be all alone, which that goes back to, our innate need, survival instinct for not being alone, because in the caveman days, if you were alone, good chances are you would get killed by, another person or by an animal or something. So there's that piece there. So there's that. I laughed though when you were saying how sometimes we do need to go from our head to react in case that saber-tooth tiger is coming, or that mountain lion is coming. And I'm thinking about a story, I think it was like a year ago, when I was grilling some spare ribs on the grill. The grill was in the driveway. It was no, it was inside the driveway, inside the garage, maybe. I can't remember exactly, but the grill caught on fire, right? To make a long story short, the grill caught on fire. I went into that fight, flight, freeze, take action kind of thing.
Yep.
However, I may have just gone a little too, like, here's the other piece of it. I did call 911 and the fire trucks came, when I don't know if it was necessarily that, much of a crisis that I needed the fire trucks to come.
Right.
So there is this balancing, right? I mean, I came from pure fear and adrenaline, and quickly I didn't know what to do. Quick, call the fire trucks, because it started flaming. I mean, I did move it out of it was in the garage. I moved it out of the garage and like further out into the driveway, away from the house, at least. So away from the cars, because the cars were there.
You say, public service announcement, don't grill in your garage, always outside.
I know. Because I started to think, oh my God, if this blows up with a propane tank next to the cars, and the cars are going to blow up. I don't even know if that's possible while they're turned off. But anyway, my point being is, and then my husband, who in those situations is much calmer, right?
Yep.
So there's the balance. Like, I don't know if necessarily he would be in his heart making that decision, but there's something that balances or balanced him more in that situation than where I was, because I was in total headspace, freaking out, adrenaline space. So
yeah, I mean, and then I'll give another example, because let's just give examples, because it's helpful, at least for me.
It's so helpful. Yeah.
Okay. So, and then we can circle back to all of these. So we're going to give a couple examples. If this works for you, I'd love to do that. I'm just going to write down. So we're going to talk about the grill example, and then an example of literal head space. So my daughter on campus last year was coming home late at night from the library. I think you heard this story, but I don't think I shared it on the podcast.
Yeah.
And there was a car that was along the side, and it was really late at night. She'd never stayed at the library that late and walked home alone that late, didn't realize how dead and quiet it is at 11:30 midnight at night, because she's used to walking home from the library later or earlier, and it's still pretty busy on campus. And this man was in a car and started chasing her in the car, and was actually driving backward. And she just flight mode. She just ran, and she called me while she was running. Couldn't even get any words out, but you could tell it was complete, real saber-toothed tiger in that moment in the modern world. And then she eventually caught up with two other college students, two men who were, she ran up and she said, "Can I walk with you? Can I walk with you?" So she was in complete sympathetic survival mode. And if she had taken herself into that heart or pause, like your husband with the grill, which is where I'm circling back, it could have ended very differently. So and that's kind of where we were talking about this conversation going, is recognizing that there are times where you have to be fully in that mode. She had to be in that mode. If she had dropped into her heart for 1 second, who knows what could have happened? I
agree.
Whereas with the grill, you needed your head, but then maybe just a little pause, like your husband was able to have, and stay a little calmer, because, okay, wait a minute. But you had the mindset to, oh, I need to take an action. I need to get the grill out of the garage. Versus, I'm going to run away, it's all going to blow up. That wouldn't have been helpful either.
Exactly.
So, I think my whole intention in sharing my daughter's experience and bringing it with yours is sometimes all head and survival mode, sometimes head and then that pause. Okay, what's the next action choice? Is that necessarily dropping into our heart, or is it finding that balance there? Like, ooh, I need to think for a second, what's the best plan of action? Because you had a little space.
Yeah, totally.
To make that choice and bring the grill out. Now, if you had paused and recognized, oh, if we just get the flames down, we're going to be okay. But it doesn't matter. It's better to, I
Yeah.
mean, so you called
Yeah.
911. I mean,
They were fine. They were fine with me. The
yeah,
fire
I mean, it's
and
probably
everything.
better that than what if you hadn't
Right.
and something worse had happened,
Right. Exactly.
you know? So having grace for ourselves and knowing that we're doing the best we can, you know? So
Yes.
you don't need to judge yourself around that.
No, exactly. I just thought it was funny. Let me tell you, my son, he did judge me and he still continues to bring it up to this day. He wants to make fun of me for how I reacted with the grill. Oh, good point. So, okay. So my husband did that. My son, though, he just sat at the counter and did nothing. Like in the sense,
the opposite, freeze.
yes, but he said he was doing it from being calm. Like he just,
Yeah.
but he totally just didn't do anything. So that was interesting. But it's good how you brought up the situation with your daughter and compared it and put it side by side so that it does illustrate more the different levels and different times when we need to be fully in the mind
Yep.
or in the brain versus, when you can take the pause.
Yeah. And that really the old primitive brain.
Exactly. That fight or flight, freeze, take action place. So, and then I'm circling back to the situation with my daughter with picking out the apartment. In a sense, we have done that, my husband and I helping, and she's getting there too, where she was full on, worry, fear. I have to do something right now, to starting to, okay, breathe, pause, one step at a time. Right.
Drop in a little more into the heart.
Drop into the heart, stay in the moment, stay in the day. There's not a lot. There are certain things you can do right now. Do what you can do now. But the whole fear about the future, you cannot control.
Right.
So just let that go if possible, work on that. And then just stay in the moment. What action can you take now? And then that's where you open up into then being guided more from the heart. If you just take it one day at a time, one moment at a time. And also, I'm going to add in, it's not only just a union with the heart and the mind, but it is also a union with the universe. And the universe is also, right, all part of us. The universal energy is a part of us, is a part of our intuition, is a part of our heart, that same energy that is so wise. And that is something that Deborah did say in our interview together, how wise and brilliant we are. And that's what she talks about tapping into.
Right.
So it's, and letting the universe just unfold as well. Again, your daughter could not afford the luxury of letting the universe unfold. She had to take that action.
Right.
But in a situation like this, when we're trying to make some bigger decisions that are going to take place in the future, it's just kind of unfold, right? It's a co-creation with the universe and our heart and mind.
Right. And I think, even going another step further is recognizing when we're having to make those split second decisions, that we then need to make sure we circle back around and drop into our heart to integrate that experience.
Yes.
So I think the balancing comes in after.
Yes. Because what will happen if we don't integrate? What's the downfall?
The trauma, then it stays in our body. We're not able to process, because then we shove it away. And so making sure we rebalance and reset ourselves. And then with your daughter, recognizing there's such an external influence, particularly the time pressure. And so now there's the shoulds and the expectations. So rather than focusing on what can she control, what is her choice, everyone's telling her what it should be, or if you choose this or that, then you're going to miss out on this, or you're going to have, this is going to be amazing, or all this external influence from the school, from landlords, from other students,
from her father and I,
so
even from her parents.
it messes it, it makes it messy and harder to
Yes.
make a more clear head heart decision.
Yes. And that's
There's
the
too much
part
input.
I agree. And that's the part that is so important, I think, when we are making decisions. Like, I'm so
Mhm.
glad you brought that up and that we're underscoring that, because that is what gets in the way. That is the smoke screen, the muck, which makes it
Yeah.
so difficult. And I had to even say to myself yesterday, because I had a conversation with my daughter. My husband had a conversation
Mhm.
with my daughter. We were both telling her what she should do.
Ooh.
And then I came back to see just our interview with Deborah just a little bit back. I came back to, okay, no, what's most important is not where she lives.
Right.
That's not the most important. It's that she learns how to
Mhm.
make the decisions for herself, for her to feel into what feels right for you.
Right.
And where it gets hard for me to let go of my control of wanting to control is because I can see that she is more in the headspace of the
Mhm.
scarcity space in this moment. Doesn't mean she'll stay there,
Right.
because she's aware too and she's working through it. But in this moment, she is coming from that pressure.
Right.
So it's like, is she truly making a guided decision
Mhm.
from her intuition? I
Right.
don't know. So I'm like, oh, I gotta, I have to
Yeah.
get in there and I have to manipulate. But no,
Yeah.
I don't, because,
So
and
it's
this
your
is
own
what,
work.
it's my own work. And this is
Yep.
what, this was brilliant yesterday on my walk when it came to me after I had the conversation was, and this is what I was saying to you, no matter what she decides or we decide on anything,
Mhm.
if it is, quote, the wrong decision, and I don't believe in wrong decisions
Right.
or bad decisions, they're just opportunities to grow, opportunities to learn lessons, and to accept the reality or consequences of
Exactly.
whatever decision or choice we made. So if she makes the choice to live in an apartment and she's away from campus and she feels more removed from the student body, and it ends up being a lonely space,
Mhm.
then that's a choice that she made because
Mhm.
she's convinced that she wants to live in an apartment,
Yeah.
off campus, away from campus. And she'll have, those are the consequences of the choices that she makes.
And it's a learning experience. And I mean,
Yeah.
that's how we grow when we make our choices,
Yeah,
especially when we're in our 20s and our late teens. You know, we don't,
totally.
it's, I made all sorts of decisions.
I know.
And you either learn from them or you have the lesson again. And so recognizing,
Yeah. The
you know,
part that's really bad, and again, that's why I'm so glad that I am on this path and I stop myself. What
mhm,
makes it really challenging is when the tapes are in our heads, the
totally.
voices of our parents. And that's what I was doing with her, was
Mm,
putting in, I was interjecting my voice. My husband was interjecting his voice. Thankfully, she's strong enough personality to say, I don't really give a F what you say, what you think. I'm going to do my own thing anyway. And
Good
she
for
was
her.
very headstrong on her points. And
Good.
that's why I was like, and I said, I totally hear you, Ange.
Mhm,
And she also said, Mom, I hear your points too.
mhm,
She's like, so she heard that as well, which tells me she's not completely limbic
right.
in making the decision, because she's open enough to hear what I was saying.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Mhm. And then noticing how and correct me if I'm wrong, but when you went into that, you were shooting her, you were in
yeah,
scarcity.
totally. Because I didn't want her to, experience being alone. And then I
Right.
was only solidifying her own fear, which
Right.
is of being alone. If you go to the underneath, the underneath, it's about being
Exactly.
alone. Because at the end of the day, you know, again, Brene Brown's quote, we are wired for
Right.
connection, just the way all the animals in nature are in
Everything's
herds.
connected, right?
Everything is connected. So to live alone and be isolated, and that was so challenging for her this year, as well as many college students, to be
Right.
so isolated, more so because of
Right.
COVID protocol or
Right.
restrictions. So she doesn't want to experience that. either. That's why she wants to be in an apartment, because then she doesn't have to abide by school rules.
Yep. She has a
You
little
know,
more freedom
freedom.
potentially.
So yeah, so I know, but I was in my own scarcity and lack. So yes, you pointed it out and you're 100% right, which is why I paused and I did a U-turn and I stopped the behavior.
Yeah.
I was like, no, I cannot do this. I cannot project onto her my own worry, my own fear, my own lack.
Right. Right. And it's her journey and she has the strength to navigate it. And does that mean there's going to be dips? Sure. That's life.
Yeah. Yeah.
So when we think of balancing our head and our heart in those decisions, and we kind of talked about how it's not all head or all heart can be dangerous too, which we didn't really touch on. And I think it's important to touch on.
Yeah. The bleeding heart.
The bleeding heart. So when we only make decisions from our heart, that can also be dangerous. You know, not saying you don't ever do that, and that can be healthy too, but oftentimes, and thinking of an example of, oh, I'm doing this because I love you, or I'm doing that, you know, so when we start thinking, or another one could be, you're in an uncomfortable situation, but you want to be seen as the good person. And, oh, if I'm not nice and kind, you know, the good girl, we're so conditioned to be the good girl and put your needs aside and do this for everyone. And you don't want to do it. And you do it anyway to look good, to people please.
Yeah.
That's dangerous too, because then you're actually not coming from your heart. You're coming from a mask. But we're telling ourselves we're making a heart-based decision too. So what's your feel on that?
Oh my God, totally. Even the last time I was in Florida, when I was just like, I felt like a yo-yo or a ping pong ball, because I was just I was doing things based upon, you know, pleasing this one or pleasing that one. Like, okay, what does my son want to do? And I was so caught in the middle. And even now, like, so I'm back here in Florida now, and this time it's just my husband and I, but I still, because I'm trying to be the pleaser, the good girl, I'm still trying to notice, like, and it's so uncomfortable, but I'm coming not from my heart. One might think, oh, I'm just trying to be easygoing and let me, you know, be nice and be kind, and like, oh, well, where do you want to go to dinner? Or, oh, you know, what do you want to do now? You know, or whatever the case is.
Right.
But you're right. It's just coming from a mask. It's not truly from the heart.
And recognizing how, when we're in that total empathetic, you know, an empath, and coming from our heart, as you know, when it actually is coming from our heart, because we've completely tossed ourselves aside, have no boundaries, don't have that set. That's so unhealthy too.
Yeah, totally. And that's why I'm checking in with myself, and, you know, I'm saying, it's just a little simple example, but he wanted to go to this one place for dinner that we go to every time we're in Orlando. And I absolutely hate the place, you know, and I've gone so many times just to be nice and be the good girl and the pleaser and whatever. And he's like, oh, I made a reservation for Big Fin, you know, for 6 o'clock. I'm like, nope, sorry, cannot do it. And then even on top of it, picked a restaurant that has more like grain bowls. Like, I like to, you know, just eat grains and those kinds of bowls. And I said, well, let's go to this one instead. And that's where we're going tonight, with no reservation either. I didn't even want to be pinpointed to a time. So I did assert myself, which again, that's bringing it more into balance, right? Instead of coming totally from that bleeding heart place.
Right. And so it comes back to head and heart. And so how do we make decisions? You know, and this really came off of the how does it make you feel conversation we had in the episode a few back with Deborah, and recognizing that it's really finding the balance of the head and the heart in each individual decision. And how do we do that? That's the question, right?
Yeah.
How do we do that?
So, well, you have to push the boundary a little bit. Like I did, like, you know, it was a little bit uncomfortable at first for me to speak up and say, like, no, I don't want to go to that restaurant. I want to go here. But once I did it and made the decision and took the action, it feels good and it feels right. It doesn't feel good to constantly be taking care of other people's needs, wants, and desires.
Right.
Even though it might look like you're such a kind person. You're
Right.
so,
You're so amazing.
you're so amazing. You're so nice. You just, whatever. It doesn't feel good to be that way.
No.
And I can guarantee a majority of our listeners can relate to that on some level.
Right. And so a lot of it is practice.
Yeah.
And, there's those questions, what do I want? Actually asking yourself, what do I want? There's a contemplative practice that I do in my circle groups. And so it's, what do you want? What do you need? And then how does it make you feel?
Yeah.
Because we have to bring in the feeling aspect, because if you're really truly honest with yourself and able to connect, and you may not be able to identify a feeling per se. We're talking more like, how does it feel in your body? What sensations in your body? So when we say, how does it feel? It may not be, oh, I feel happy or joyful.
Right.
Speaking up and saying you want to go to this other restaurant, I don't want to go, that may not feel good in a intellectual way. Because you're creating a boundary and the other person might be upset. But what are the sensations in your body? Often, you feel expansion, or you may feel, if it's not a good decision, your throat might get tight. But it can also feel tight if you're creating a boundary and that's uncomfortable.
Yes.
So it's practice and discernment of recognizing.
That's the key, discernment.
And it is not easy. And sometimes there's bigger decisions that you're not going to have an answer for a long time. So then it comes back to that ultimate question, which, accept it, change it, or leave it.
Completely.
And so where does that head and heart dance in that question?
So amazing.
It's so much to take in.
It
and
is.
I think we're so focused as humans to try to get it right. I have to make the right decision. I have to make sure
because if it's not right, if it's not the right decision, then something awful or bad may happen to me if it's the wrong decision. And because our brains, our minds are wired to move away from pain and toward pleasure, we don't want to make the wrong decisions, because some type of pain, emotional pain, could be physical pain, may be attached to the quote wrong decision.
And I'm going to challenge that. Sometimes the right decision is painful.
Yes.
I'm trying to think of an example, but I know I have had that where the right decision doesn't feel good. It feels better later once the dust has settled.
Well, I know I bring this up all the time, but even the decision with my mom.
There you go.
That was painful. That was so painful to make the decision to not intubate her a third time, because that meant she would die.
Right.
And it was painful. But I also knew, and after the dust settled, I haven't looked back once on that decision.
And you also integrated that decision within you, what we talked about earlier, how that was important, that you took the time to feel that decision after it was made.
Completely.
That's a great, difficult example.
And another one would be divorce for some people. Do you know what I mean? It may be very painful to go through a divorce, but in the end, when things are all, or you may know or feel that it was completely the right decision. Sometimes you may not know until a little while after.
And it can be little decisions too, with our kids, like, oh, I have to not tell them what to do and let them falter and fall and, let the natural consequences.
That is painful.
It's very painful, but it's also the right decision, because if we're always stepping in to make things easy and, do the snowplow parenting or whatever you want to call it, that's not healthy. But it might not feel better because it doesn't create pain for the child or ourselves in that moment, but in the long term, it actually does. So that's where,
great point.
It's so gray. It's so gray.
Yes.
So go ahead.
I'm just going to say, this isn't an easy, cut and dry kind of conversation or a way of looking at making decisions.
And just like everything, we just invite you to look at it that it's not always going to feel good.
Yeah.
It's sometimes the right decision from our head and our heart is uncomfortable.
The feeling bad though is different, I think, when you're making a decision based out of lack versus like
Yes.
it's in alignment. It might feel
Great
painful
point.
or bad, but it's a different kind of feel bad.
Right.
Like when I'm making decisions out of, yeah, I know it's like the hair day today. When I'm making decisions out of fear, lack, and scarcity, and a mask, that feels very different than I'm making a decision from alignment, although albeit painful.
Yes.
There's more of a knowing involved that this is in alignment with my true self. And it's cleaner. It's clean. It's a clean decision. It's a clean feeling.
Yes. It doesn't mean it's a good feeling or a bad feeling. It's just clean and clear and coming from that abundance, knowing state versus scarcity. I think that's I don't think we can stress that enough.
Yes.
That in the decision making, are you coming from scarcity and lack?
Yes.
Or abundance and knowing? And, we've been toying with this before we started recording. The balance of head and heart is potentially your intuition, the gut.
Yeah.
So it's the body, mind, spirit connection and the knowing. And even if it's difficult and hard, it's truth. Because how often is speaking your truth easy?
It's not. It's hard. It's painful.
Mm-hmm. Especially when we know we might hurt another in the process.
Yeah. Or get backlash for it.
Right. Right.
And that's the big challenge with a people pleaser. Mm-hmm. That's a good reason why people don't take that mask off.
Right.
The potential rejection from the other, the backlash, upsetting another.
Right. But then again, we're looking at the external versus am I enough inside that I can handle a potential rejection or pushback and be okay with that? Yeah. And it comes with practice and time.
It comes with practice and time.
And knowing you're enough no matter what.
Completely. Yeah. This was a great one today. Yes. All right.
So much more to dig into with it too, but we can't talk for 8 hours.
I know.
Well, we could, but we don't want to record it for 8 hours.
Yes. We'll just leave more for another episode.
That's right.
Stay tuned.
That's right.
So thank you everybody for listening. We totally appreciate your support. And if you would like, just like, comment, even subscribe on YouTube.
Yeah, we'd love that.
That'd be great.
And subscribe in your favorite podcast platform too.
Yes, exactly.
All right, everybody.
Have a great day, everyone.
Bye.